Changemakers is a movement created by the Manny Cantor Center, engaging New Yorkers to take action. I'm Eden Perlove with the America 101 Project. With my co-founder, Lily Nussbaum, we created the America 101 Project out of a desire to learn more about timely topics from the people who know them intimately and can share a unique perspective. And a few topics are more timely or fundamental than community organizing. During this conversation, I spoke with Ashley Williams, who created and led the largest political organizing training ever for 16,000 live viewers as part of a partnership between Crooked Media and Organizing Together 2020. Prior to her record-breaking work at OT 2020, Ashley managed Swing Left's college fellowship program. Outside of politics, Ashley runs multiple businesses, including a social justice-focused child care placement agency. She's created podcasts, worked as a wellness coach, and got her start in the live music industry while in college. I hope you find the conversation as enlightening as I did. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, yeah. So I am Ashley and my pronouns are she, her. I'm based in New York City and I am a person like so many people who are probably watching this who has always followed politics or been interested in it and not actually taken action until, well, I got involved in 2008 and it like changed my life. I always say the first time I went and canvassed for Senator Obama, that it was like the moment the world went from black and white to color. And it was just like, oh, like, what is this? But I just stayed involved as a volunteer sort of during like the bigger cycles. But then like everyone post 2016, I was just like, I shouldn't be doing anything else with my time other than working to save our democracy. And so, so not too long after 2016, I started a Get Out the Vote brunch club, and we'll probably talk about what Get Out the Vote is for those who don't know, but started a Get Out the Vote brunch club called Resistance Brunch, which was essentially just calling voters for different races, and we would sometimes write postcards to voters, but with like a fun brand name. And I think I sort of like unintentionally branded myself as a person who takes political organizing work and tries to make it fun and joyful and accessible to new volunteers. And then in 2018, I started working full-time in politics at Swing Left, which is a grassroots organization that was built with a single focus of flipping the House in 2018. And so what we did was match up people in sort of safe blue areas with congressional races in like purple areas that were flippable, and then volunteers would adopt those areas and go and talk to voters there. And so I ran their college fellowship program, and then most recently I've been working at Organizing Together 2020, which similarly was built to turn out voters in those like top priority 6 states. And I was the national training director. So again, I got to train volunteers and like introduce people to this work, which is like just so joyful and fun, and seeing people go from thinking they don't have any power to like knowing that they do is just like so beautiful and amazing. And at the time we're recording this, I'm about to start a new role with Crooked Media and their Vote Save America program. So with that, I'll be again working directly with volunteers, creating a community for their Adopt a State program that right now has around 150,000 people who signed up to volunteer in 6 high priority battleground states. So that's what I'm doing now. But again, my background is like totally not in politics. I worked in the music industry. I was a wellness coach. I've hosted podcasts. So all that is to say, it doesn't matter what you're doing now. Like there is a place for you in this work. And that's what I really love about it, is that like you walk in the door or you come to the Zoom, whatever it is, and you're just like immediately needed and necessary, which I really love.
What exactly is community organizing?
Yeah, so good question. And it's exactly what it sounds like. So at its core, it's people talking to other people about the issues that matter to them. And as we sort of move through an election year, so there's like different phases of an election. The first is capacity building, where campaigns are staffing up, they're fundraising. The staff is finding volunteers. Those volunteers are finding more volunteers. And then we get into the persuasion phase, which is probably what more people are familiar with, where you're like either calling voters, registering registering would also sort of be, I guess, in like registering to voters you do the whole time forever. But persuasion is when you're talking to voters, asking them what issues matter to them, asking them if they know who they're going to vote for. And then everything in organizing is very like data focused. So in that period, you're also giving people a score of how likely they are to vote for your candidate come November. And so those are the people at the end of that cycle during GOTV or Get Out the Vote. Those top priority people are the ones you go back to. So that's sort of like the goals of what organizing is. But community organizing, again, is people talking to people in their community, or if you are in an area that's always going to go to the Democrats and you're a Democrat, you may volunteer in another community by adopting them, whether it's through an organization or because you grew up somewhere, or, my family lives in Florida. So like, I care a lot about what happens in Florida. And so, yeah, it's really just talking to people and like finding out what matters to them, coming to like shared values of like, this matters to you, this matters to me. And then thinking about how, whether it's an election or movement work, how you can bring those shared values to making change and creating change. And then sort of the other big thing in community organizing or any form of organizing is developing leaders, because there are so many people to talk to. There are so many protests to plan, so many voters to register, and we need endless amounts of people to do it. So it's all about finding people who have those shared interests and goals and then developing them to be leaders so that they can go out and do the work as well.
Amazing. And you touched on this a little bit. What sort of community organizing do you do?
Yeah, so I not again. I don't know if I said this. I live in New York City, and so we're a pretty blue area. Obviously, there are parts that are not, and there are parts that are becoming more progressive with candidates like AOC and folks like that that are amazing. So most of my sort of community organizing has often been in states like Florida and Pennsylvania and Ohio. When I first got involved in 2007 and 2008, it was going on car trips and bus trips to Pennsylvania. And I was actually in Pennsylvania for those last few days of the Obama election. I was there on election night. I was like cheering in the streets in Philadelphia that night. And so for me, I think at this point, because I'm, a little bit more experienced, I tend to go more towards like planning the events and like bringing people together and organizing them, as opposed to like maybe like not making so many calls to voters, but like getting the space and like setting up the systems and talking to the campaigns to bring people together so that they can do the work. And then in my actual like professional capacity, it's, training volunteers. I was training college students to be organizers, and now engaging Crooked Media's audience to, take this energy and like political know-how that they have as listeners to their shows and like actually putting that into action. So I would say at the core of my organizing is getting people to go from like, that sounds important, to like doing the thing.
What sort of work goes into becoming a community organizer or a volunteer?
So I think, again, the thing that I love about this work is that like if you show up and you're like competent and like you show up a second time, you get a job, like may not be a paid job, but you get like a responsibility, you get a cool title, you're a comfort captain, you're a bus captain, you're a phone bank captain, whatever. And like you will be given responsibilities. So like the way to do it, I would say like go online and like look at like a candidate's website, or there's a platform called Mobilize America or Action Network where you can, it's like all the different campaigns will have all their events on there. Tap into your networks, ask on social media of people who are doing this work, and find the places that have volunteer openings and go do the work and like show up again and show up again. And then next thing you know, you're going to be like running an office. And I think similarly for staff, like it's, most people start out as volunteers or getting fellowships or internships. And so it's just like showing up and showing that you're scrappy and you can hustle and you meet goals. Like everything in organizing is about like numbers and goals and metrics. So showing that you can do that and you're reliable. And then, kind of like many industries, it's a lot about networking and connecting with people and applying for things. That has been my experience recently of like applying for a job that I 100% did not think I was qualified for. When I got the offer, I almost said to them, like, I know I have a really common name. Did you mean for this to go to a different Ashley Williams? Like 100% didn't think I was getting it. And then I did, and it was really successful in the role. But so I think, putting yourself out there and applying for things, like even if you've never been an organizer before, like, do some volunteering, like learn the lingo, and then like customize your resume so that it like matches what campaigns are looking for. And then like, it's all about capacity and numbers. So like they need you and they like need people like right now because we have like 100 and something days till the election. So now is the time.
What changes have you seen happen from the work that you do?
Changes like to the work, like in like the COVID world.
The socio-political world, what sort of changes have you seen sort of happen because of the organizing that you've been able to do?
Yeah, well, we elected Barack Obama. That was a big one. And I did a bunch of stuff for Doug Jones, which was like a really big deal election in Alabama, obviously. So I think, the payoff obviously is winning the races. But for me, on a personal level, it really is about like people saying that they have power to do something. And I have volunteers who will email me like years later and be like, "You're not going to remember me, but I was on a bus trip that you led to Pennsylvania, and I just want you to know, like, I'm still involved, and I've organized my book club, and we're going to raise money, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that." So I think for me, just like the biggest impact that stands out to me and is meaningful, aside from winning elections, which obviously have all sorts of implications, would be seeing people feel empowered and knowing that like everything is political, and so like sitting it out is like not a great idea, and that like we can all bring our different skills and talents to it, and you don't have to be a policy expert. I think that's another thing, is like there's a place for everyone. And so just like, yeah, seeing people feel empowered, I think, and then how that ripples. And I've had people come to my events as volunteers and like quit their jobs and like move to other states and become, one of them's like working for like a mayor of some big city in Florida, and like just because he came to one of my events once. So like seeing that like ripple effect of how it impacts people's lives, I think is really powerful.
How has COVID affected your work?
So so in my role at Organizing Together, like the original like thing I was hired to do was to travel to 6 different battleground states and like lead trainings and help with staff onboardings and help work with our training teams to put those on. 3 days after I moved to DC to start the job, we became an entirely remote organization and had to pivot completely. So luckily in our case, we just had to take things away. We had to take away the like in-person event component. We had to take away the canvassing component for staff or for organizers. But luckily I had experience in like doing online distributed programs for organizing before. So I think, yeah, everything has had to be online. And like now, as like some states are opening up, we have to like think through like, do we go with like that state's guidelines, or do we do what's actually recommended by medical experts and what is actually best for our staff who, may be part of communities that are already being most impacted by COVID, so, and thinking about how do we have staff who may not have access to the internet, right? Like it's not a given that everyone has that. And how do we reach volunteers if we can't go to their home? So where we're at this point in the cycle, which is still, fairly early, it hasn't been that big of a transition because we wouldn't be so much in the canvassing phase yet. But looking towards the fall, I think that's going to be the thing that like so many campaigns are like trying to figure out how to like make that pivot. And it's still really up in the air what that looks like. I think also voter registration is normally done, in person with a clipboard on a college campus. Like that's where it happens, and it's not. And so I think that is a big concern of like, how do we make sure we're getting the right people, the people we need to register to vote to win in November? How do we get them registered when like not every state has online voter registration? Not everyone knows how, it's complicated intentionally most of the time. So yeah, so sort of thinking through like how we meet the goals we need to meet to win, I think is sort of like the biggest shift. But for the most part, I think like most campaigns and organizations have pretty easily been able to pivot to just like doing things virtually. But it also, I think, really changes the experience of volunteers and staff, because like so much of what so many of us love about this is like being in the room with people and you're tired and you're eating stale pizza and you're just like, oh, so overwhelmed. But it's like you're in like this battle together with like a single focused goal. And to like not have that, actually I've seen is really impacting staff morale and actually the mental health of some organizers, because they feel so isolated and they're talking to people who are dealing with COVID stuff, and they're like, I will die and I don't care, like I need to get to the polls, like can you help me get to the polls? And they're like, it's my job to help you, but also I don't want you to die by going to the polls and being exposed. So it's actually like really impacting people's like mental health around like having these conversations. So yeah, so it's all, I think, still really like in flux, and hopefully someone somewhere is like thinking it all through and like what it looks like. But I definitely think like leaning into like distributed methods and relational organizing, which is more like talking to people that already, instead of like getting a list of priority voters, will be the priority going forward.
If someone wants to become more active in their communities, what can they do?
Yeah. So again, Mobilize America is a great place to start. Talking to your friends. Like I think most friend groups have that person that's like, the political person, like ask them. They're probably like dying for you to ask. Um, so you can, yes, you can go to Mobilize America. You can go to Crooked Media has their Vote Save America initiative where you can, like, if you live in New York City, you can adopt a state that is going to decide the election, like Pennsylvania or Arizona or Wisconsin. Swing Left is another group that I mentioned that does similar stuff. So I would just start like Googling like political volunteer opportunities in such and such area, and like you will see a whole new world open up that like you didn't know existed. So yeah, so I think it's really, it's finding it, and then also like taking that first step to go to the first thing, getting trained, and also like it's okay if like your first thing you go to you don't like doing or you don't like the group, like definitely like shop around. Like people should be actively working to keep their volunteers. So like it's okay if you go to one thing and you're like they weren't, super welcoming, or they like all knew each other and I felt weird. Like go, keep shopping around until you find the right thing. And if you don't find the thing that you want, start your own thing. Like I wanted to find a group that was like doing this work, but like in a fun, joyful way, and had like good food and like playlists and champagne, and it didn't exist. So I made it, right? And like hundreds of people would come. So I think like that's always my biggest advice. Like if it doesn't exist where you are, create it.
Chatting with me today. That was great.
Thanks for having me.